Every man and woman loves when you're in your short shorts. Now you're scared to be no take it off. Should I listen to this speech and emphasize prevention? We get the looky but we not report a line. Especially in this time. It's not a dream of mine to face in aspiration. No, there was something I chose to do. Why is the world often misunderstood? It's time for us as a people to lift up in mission. So with the death of Jesus Christ, yes, we know when lives are lost.
All right. Thank you so much, Donovan. Thank you, thank you. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. So again, thank you guys so much for attending and for getting connected in with us today. And welcome to the Jamaica Diaspora Crime Intervention and Prevention Task Force. I am Angel Grant. I will be hosting you guys today. And I do have my wonderful co-host of Donovan Longmore assisting me today. So thank you guys so much again.
You're welcome.
We are going to be looking at violence auditing, and our guest speaker today is going to be Dr. Herbert Gayle. So I'm interested to hear as much information as he's going to be providing for us today. Now, just a couple of housekeeping remarks, because we are in Zoom, which is not what you guys are accustomed to in terms of when the diaspora gets together. But what we are going to be doing as far as communication right now, everyone is, I believe, on mute or is not able to unmute themselves at this time because we are getting straight into our meeting today. However, we are going to be utilizing communication via the chat today, as well as raising our hands. So those options are available to you through Zoom. If you have any issues with them, just feel free to send me a chat or a message by going to the top of your screen. There should be a selection at the top of your Zoom with the 3 dots where you see like more, where you'll be able to get to the chat if you're unable to locate it, okay? But that's just our general housekeeping. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Donovan today to start us off in prayer, and then hopefully we'll be hearing from our Consul General of Miami. All right, I can't really hear you.
All right, I'm back.
All right, there you go.
Thank you so much, Angel. Ms. Grant. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another wonderful, of course, agenda that we have provided here, the Jamaican Crime Intervention and Prevention Task Force. As you know, things haven't been the best in terms of what's been happening in Jamaica, but we're here in the diaspora to make sure that we do help to make a difference in our loved country. So at this time, like Ms. Grant said, we're going to have a word of prayer. So let us pray. Most eternal and heavenly Father, we come before you, God, just giving you thanks for this day. We thank you for waking up this morning and for you brightening us in our right minds and our right thoughts. We give you thanks, dear God, because if it wasn't for you, where would we be? And Father, as we gather here today, we ask that you may just be in our minds and our thoughts, dear Father God, that we might be on one accord to help our country. You said in your word, dear Father God, if we, your people, would humble ourselves and pray and turn from our evil ways, dear Father God, you would hear our cry, you would answer us, and you would heal our land. We pray right now for the intervention of Jamaica, dear Father God. We ask that you may touch each and every individual, dear Father God, even the Prime Minister all the way down, the leaders of the opposition, all those in Parliament, the parents, the children, the sons, the daughters, everyone in the country, because it takes a community effort, dear Father God. And we look to you from whence cometh our help. We thank you for blessing us in all this that's happening, even the coronavirus, dear Father God. Keep us safe and sound. Let us follow protocols, dear God. And as we go through this meeting today, Father God, we ask you to let your Holy Spirit just guide and protect us, because without you, we're nothing. We love you, we honor you, we glorify you, we praise you. Bless the speakers that's going to speak today, Father God, and continue, dear Father God, to uplift us in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. We do give thanks and pray and say amen and amen.
Amen.
Can somebody pass the offering plate now? No. Okay. I don't know if we have our counsel from Miami.
Yes, he's
Okay.
actually here. I can see him.
Oh, I see
Yes.
him. Yes, Mr.
Yeah.
Oliver Mair.
All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here. The Jamaica Diaspora Crime Intervention and Prevention Task Force, AGM. Thank you for inviting me. I want to recognize everybody who has taken the time here on a Sunday afternoon to be here to discuss the business of crime intervention and prevention on behalf of our homeland. I want to acknowledge, I see Dr. Elaine Bryan, our honorary consul to Atlanta. I see Dr. Alan Cunningham, Dr. Dunkley, of course, Dr. Francis, of course, and our guest speaker, Dr. Gayle. And of course, everybody here today has a very important role. I'm going to be brief. 2017 and 2018, I had the honor of volunteering at the Tower Street Correctional Facility in Jamaica for 2 years. Every Tuesday, we'd go in as a part of a group and we would provide leadership and life skills to the inmates. And most of the inmates we interacted with were, persons that had major crimes and were in there for life, had life sentences. What I found were ordinary men who had just made bad decisions, or had the wrong influences, and had now come to realize that they made a very bad mistake. And many of them were willing to, make the change. They were open to coaching. And one of the statistics that was highlighted to me was that 75% of persons who actually leave the facility after their sentences are likely to recommit. Recidivism. I hope I got that pronunciation. Recidivism. They're likely to recommit. So likely to do another offense. So actually spending time with them in the facility, according to the official numbers, helped to reduce when they measured those persons going back out in society, there was less reoffense. I haven't heard the latest figures, but I was happy to contribute in that regard. It was a team that went out, and I say that to say that to make the point that a couple of things I found. One is that our men right now are in crisis. Our men need support. A lot of the support that has been offered over the years have been to women. And I'm a full advocate for support, continued support for ladies. They deserve it. And I'm happy to see how well all women continue to do and the positions of leadership that they have right now. But our men need support. And Dr. Gayle will speak about that. I'm happy that he's our guest speaker. It's a gentleman I've heard extensively, even before I became Consul General, and I recommended from very early to reach out to Dr. Gayle because of his research base. He's done this type of work in a number of the LAC countries, and he's picked up some particular trends and patterns that we need to be aware of, especially as a group. We're crafting strategy to offer support to the Jamaican government, and it should be couched in a lot of research. And Dr. Gayle brings that level of expertise. He has been doing it for quite a while. And his research would speak to the fact that there needs to be serious intervention with supporting our Jamaican men. I welcome the formation of the Jamaican Men of Florida. I'm proud to be the patron of the group, and Dr. Alan Cunningham and team. There's a lot of work for you, and there's a lot of work for everybody on the call, because I really believe that this is an issue. This is a national issue that needs all hands on deck. And the mantra, if it's going to be, it's up to me, should always be at the front and center for us. If we want to see the change, we need to be a part of the change that we would like to see. The solution is not out there, it's within. And right here within this group, we must always have the mindset that we can make the change that we would like to see. And we must believe it's possible. I leave you with this. It's may be a little unrelated, but I remember when I spoke with Captain Burrell, and he had this crazy vision of going to the World Cup. And I heard him, I saw him on a flight, and I engaged him in a conversation. And before I spoke to him, I really thought he may have been a little off mentally. But when I heard him, I also became convinced. And as you know, we ended up qualifying for the World Cup. But what happened there was a whole movement. If you remember 1998, it was a whole movement. All hands were on deck. We all got involved. We were all there to support the boys, our reggae boys. And now our young men in Jamaica need that rally, need that support from all of us pulling together to making a difference, to giving them the opportunity that they need, the opportunity that is so available right here in the United States. That young men can get an opportunity to realize their goals, their aspirations. Our young men in Jamaica need that sort of intervention. And I implore us to think outside the box, to work together as a team, and let's make this happen. So, Dr. Gayle, special welcome to you. I'm happy you are here. Your research, I believe, will be a guiding light as we seek to craft strategy going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Consul General Mair. We do appreciate that. Very surprising statistics, but nonetheless, you guys have been doing such a wonderful job in terms of making things better for our young men and our youths, and we do applaud you for that in the area that you're in. And at this time, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have introductions of the founding members, Jamaica Diaspora Crime Prevention and Preventive Task Force. Founding members, as you can see, Dr. Rupert A. Francis, educator, criminal justice task force lead, Lieutenant Colonel retired Bruce Barclay. Of course, we also have Herbert N. Nelson Jr. We have Captain Peter Whittingham, community policing coordinator. We have attorney Wayne Golding, Diaspora Advisory Board, Southeast USA. Joan Pinnock, attorney at law from the Diaspora Advisory Board member for the Northeast. And we also have Commander Denise McCullough Creary, Chief Devin Clunis of Winnipeg, Canada. And of course, we have Superintendent Stacy Clark from out of Canada, Bishop Cecil Riley, former JCF and out of New York. And we have Staff Sergeant Herbert Nelson from the USA Intelligence, Lieutenant Colonel Bruce Barclay, Mr. Sandro Villa, Inner Circle Foster Care Agency out of California, So Newton James, and of course, he's a member of the task force. And we also have, ladies and gentlemen, regional heads, Dr. Rupert Francis from the United States, Captain Kevin Jr. out of Canada, and Elder Olive Norman out of United Kingdom. So we do appreciate it, and thank you guys for being a part of this great forum and for being founding members of such a great community. And at this time, we're going to have none other than the one and only introduction, Dr. Herbert Gayle, done by the one, the captain, the man himself, Mr. Rupert Francis.
Okay, thank you very much for the wonderful introduction, Donovan. Thank you very much, Angel, for your introduction as well and your participation. Thank you very much to the Consul General for what he had to say in regards to what important crime, the resolution of crime and the solution of crime is to our small island and indeed the world. I have the distinct honor and pleasure to have been offered the ability to lead the organization from 2015 until we are here now. And every time we have made a lot of gains and we have had a lot of pushbacks, but at the same time, we have a group of people who have been resilient, that have been part of this organization and have followed us, and we have had, as I said, our ups and downs. However, one thing is for certain is that we are very deliberate in our intentions to make sure that we as Jamaicans come together and try to resolve issues that are plaguing our country. At the same time, we want to take cognizance of the fact that St. Vincent right now is going through the throes of an eruption in their country. And so we have to be mindful of their safety and the people's safety at the same time. So that is even added to the crime problem that is pervasive through the West Indies. We also have to take into consideration, this is our island. You know, I've had recently to talk to some members of the Jamaican public. And I get the sense that sometimes, you know, we think that we're, you know, the second cousins of Jamaicans. And, you know, really and truly, it really hurts to know that, you know, we're born in the same land, but sometimes we're not appreciated as we should. And we feel very, very strongly about what is happening in terms of the, especially against women in particular. And some of the facts that Dr. Gayle will be speaking about will be very, very interesting, because some of the views that we have may not be us. Dr. Gayle will be coming on shortly. I hope to be able to you know, to be able to speak to us on time. His time is limited because, you know, he has a lot of things. But just a little background on Dr. Herbert Gayle. He got his PhD out of London, and he has an MSc and a BA and from the University of the West Indies, a senior lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Mona. And he specialized in violence and gangs, murder, suicide, repeat killers, domestic violence, etc. And he's an anthropologist, a criminal anthropologist, that will in fact be able to disentangle the business of crime and where it came from. I've heard him before, and I'm telling you, I've trying to study him every time as to what his analysis is and to compare them to the evidence-based practice that we are accustomed to. But I'm sure that Dr. Gayle will be able to bring us to a point where we can understand why we have so much violence. And as the Consul General alluded, that, you know, in Jamaica, the violence is perpetrated by men. And even in my own study, for example, I found that young men were actually accidentally, whatever by purpose, you know, they would go towards criminality anywhere in the world. But we have a responsibility to make sure that this does not happen and to see. Sometimes we right in our face and we don't know. How do we stop this? Can we stop this? And Dr. Gayle has some interest. He's now wanting to do what is called an audit of the crime in Jamaica. And he has done it in elsewhere in Belize and other. He's done it and worked with the powers that be, both opposition and the government. The crimes were reduced by 50%. That's what we're looking for in Jamaica. So, you know, I know that many of us have signed up for and would like to do business in certain areas, like among the youth, especially young men, young women, and children, older people, also in various areas, to see if we can upgrade the social infrastructure that can help us to reach where we are. Because I do not believe we can resolve this issue of crime and violence unless we address the social infrastructure and other infrastructures in the island. It's not policing. There are basically two types of policing: hard policing and soft policing, and you know, and of course you have intelligence-driven policing. But those are the two main ones. And sometimes I think that we are putting too much emphasis on the hard policing and very little emphasis on the people, which we would do the hard policing is. So we have sometimes a disconnect. If you see some of the videos that is coming out of Jamaica, a disconnect between the people and the police, and the police should be part of the people and vice versa. And many of you may attest to this, that this was the case. Now, I hope I'm not taking too much of your time, but I'm hoping Dr. Gayle has come on by this time. If he's not here yet, I could make sure that to see if he's and check to see if he's here or he's having any difficulty coming on. But in the meantime, I would think I'll take my pause here, and maybe what we could do until Dr. Gayle comes on is perhaps introduce some of the other players that we have here on the forum right now, on the meeting. Is that possible, Mr. Longmore and Angel?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, that is perfectly fine.
Okay, wonderful. Let's move on then, because let us introduce. First of all, I remember seeing Dr. Nelson. Dr. Nelson, could you introduce yourself? You have about 30 seconds, sir. Are you hearing me, Dr. Nelson? Could we unmute him?
Unmute first, Dr. Nelson. So I can get to it. Hold on.
All right, I'm not seeing Dr. Nelson on here right now.
Okay. What about Dr. Hall? Dr. Hall on?
Dr. Hall is on.
Okay, could we have him introduce himself?
Dr. Hall, you're unmuted.
Hi guys, first of all, good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful forum. And I feel very much like I don't belong here, because the guys are so esteemed and so accomplished in your own right. Nonetheless, I am a son of the soil. I was born in Jamaica, migrated here many years ago, did my my training in surgery at Stony Brook University Medical Center, and did my fellowship in general surgery and weight loss surgery at NYU. And I presently hold a private practice in upstate New York, where I do all sort of operations on the abdominal wall, including, I guess, as I mentioned before, weight loss surgery, colon cancers, small bowel cancers, etc. Most importantly, despite all the stuff I do, I'm more interested in giving back to the Jamaican community. And it was just natural that we had a very good relationship with Captain Francis, and he had invited me.
Yes, sir. We're waiting on you. Yes,
Huh?
you are.
What did you say?
I don't think he's talking to you, Dr. Hall. I think he's
talking
I think he's on the phone.
Oh, okay.
Continue.
Okay, so basically, most importantly, of all the things that I've done, I'm just most proud of being a part of this organization. And I look forward to where it will take us and collectively as a group, as we enhance just the general standard of living in our country, Jamaica. And I'll do whatever I can to contribute to such. So it's indeed and truly an honor for me to be here with you guys. And I look forward to getting a chance to meeting you guys later on. And I'm very excited to hear what Dr. Gayle has to say. So I'm here, I'm ready, and I'm listening. Thank you very much, guys.
Well said. We appreciate you. Dr. Francis, you're not unmuted.
Yes, Dr. Francis, you are not unmuted. Hold on. There you go.
Okay, all right, there it is. Dr. Gayle is on, it as Herbert Gayle. So we're just gonna take just two more as those 30 seconds, guys, because we have him coming on, okay? So there you are. Cordella Lyon, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm sorry, good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me into this very productive space. I am a registered nurse from Jamaica. I live in Southeast Texas, and I specialize in HIV detection and linkage to care. I'm very interested to see where we can go in addressing the public health issues as it relates to crime in Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lyon. All right, so Mr. Gayle, excuse me, Dr. Francis, did you have someone else that you wanted to acknowledge real quick before we had Mr. Gayle come on?
A number of people, but everybody has to forgive me. We have to maybe wait until after the presentation, and then we can do more. Oh, we have Dr. Alan Cunningham and Dr. Dunkley. We should really have them say a couple words. Thank you.
Dr. Cunningham. All right, Dr. Cunningham, if you could go ahead and unmute so we can hear from you.
Yes, thanks for the invitation. The Jamaica Diaspora Crime Task Force is a critical component in the nation's crime fighting strategies, whether they want to accept it or not. My name is Dr. Alan Cunningham, the Global Jamaica Diaspora Consul representative for the 13 southern states. and most importantly, the president of the Jamaican Men of Florida. And as you know, in Florida, we are the closest diaspora body to the island. So we have access, I would hope. But our philosophy is to empower young Jamaican men to make sure that they are doing the right thing. And I think that this is one of the foundations that we should build on. I'm looking at the audience now, those that were signing. I recognize Judge Norman Hemmings. I recognize our CG, Dr. Rupert Francis. All these great men are honorary members of the organization. So I'm happy to be here, happy to share space as well.
Thank you so much. All right, and I believe it was Dr.
Karen Dunkley.
Karen Dunkley. All right,
Yes, indeed.
Dr.
The
Dunkley, I am
Northeast
coming
Diaspora.
to unmute you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much to the organizers of this event. Protocols observed. Let me just say that I'm going to yield my time because this is such a critical topic. I have to commend you, Dr. Rupert Francis. You continue to lead the way in the struggle to see how we can create a better Jamaica. And when I think of the role that the Jamaica Diaspora Crime Intervention and Prevention Task Force needs to play at this unique moment in history, as we continue to see the spate in the violent crimes against women and children, against the youth, just dropping like flies. I'm really excited to hear Dr. Herbert Gayle and to learn a little bit more about this violence auditing. And then we as a diaspora can think about what are some common sense approaches that we will continue to advocate for Dr. Francis as we have done in the past. So thank you so much for having me. I bring you greetings from our 14 states in the Northeast. Thank you.
Thank you, leader, Dr. Dunkley.
Thank you so much. All right, so Dr. Gayle, I'm going to come to you and unmute you and turn it over to you.
All right, let me say good afternoon to everyone. And let me begin by just saying that it is a privilege to speak to my extended family quite often. For those of us who've done diaspora studies, when you work with violence, we've always thought that the diaspora is a central part of us. In fact, that we are ourselves diaspora of another set of people. And it's interesting that quite often we make plans right across the region without consulting and working directly with those of us who whose hearts and spirits and chakra are still at home, but just the bodies elsewhere. So I want to begin by making a disclaimer, and I like to do this when I work with persons who have the capacity to make changes. I want to point out that in ignorance, we do things, but after being informed and after critically assessing the information we receive, which is called positive skepticism, that there is an expectation within us for change. And that I've often said, in fact, I said this to a prime minister once. I said, are you certain you want to learn? Because after you've learned, you can no longer say, I'm a sweet idiot. And he said, all right, I don't want to be a sweet idiot. I prefer be a bitter activist. And I said, all right, let's go. So today we're going to be looking at some very delicate material. Some of the material you will see are very counter to the stuff that you believe. And please note the word believe, not know, because belief is very different. One of the things when you teach the philosophy of research in research is that you have to get students to move away from belief, prejudice, stereotypes, and to look at science. What is intriguing is that science, belief, propaganda, or campaigns, stereotypes, prejudice, all of them are built on something called prior knowledge. In other words, even the person who says, even the most racist person can make a statement that I do have some knowledge on what I am saying and can be correct in some of the instances. So science is where we rely, because it's the only area where we don't just rely on prior knowledge, which can lead us in a direction, because the knowledge we had in the beginning could be wrong, but we rely on that which is reliable and consistent and valid, which is the core of science. I want to share, my host, could you kindly permit me to share? I want to share with you a PowerPoint. Okay, and can someone indicate that this PowerPoint is now up and running? Okay, great, thanks. So we want to look very quickly at, thank you very much. We want to look very quickly at this idea of violence in Jamaica and the way forward. And I want to use a framework we call ontological security to show you the direction we think the world needs to go, the country needs to go. So, all right, so in order for us to address violence in Jamaica, it is critical to know a few things. Jamaica is the fourth most violent place on earth, all right? We're not just a regular country, we're violent. And social violence is extremely gendered. In fact, violence in Jamaica is the most gendered in the entire world. And I can tell you this by looking at the data. And you have to forgive me, I'm a nerd. I will stay up in the nights and look at the data from the UNODC. I will look at any data, and I have a few nerds around me who will work with me on these data. And we're clear that Jamaica has the most gendered violence in the entire world. So you look at that, young men account for over 91% of victims in Jamaica and 96% of perpetration. And if you understand the way the science operates, you will see that they are not abnormal in themselves, but they are actually what we call excessive compared to other countries. So solutions, therefore, have to focus on them. But of course, we know the focus of development is on young women in Jamaica. That's problematic, and we're going to come back to that. Jamaica's inner city and adjoining working class areas account for over 80% of murders in Jamaica. That's another thing for us to keep in our heads as we go. Violence is age specific with, of course, yes, the 15 to 34 age group being the combatant group. And we're going to come back and look at that too. And the country has two violence hubs with centers in Kingston and Montego Bay. And once we get that, we can begin to move a little bit. So Jamaica is located in this area called the LAC, Latin America and the Caribbean, which, by the way, accounts for 9.5% of the world's population, but 39.8% of homicides. So what is it that's so weird about this space? It just has 9.5% of the world's population, but it punches 4 times its weight in killing. And it's because this area is the colonized zone of the world. Once, remember when you went to school, you learned about the New World? We actually live in the New World. And it means, therefore, that the countries in this zone have a crisis, which we call protracted transition, because they have not moved as other countries from being ruled to self-rule. They have not moved very well. And what has happened is that almost all their governments, literally 90% of the governments in this zone, have actually depended on force rather than to address the development issues. And that's the crisis. So the crisis is not just social, it is also based on political decisions. Now, here's the data showing the most violent countries in the world. And this is on average, by the way, from the year 2000 until now. So it's not a single year. This is the average of all the data. Honduras, the most violent, El Salvador, Venezuela, Jamaica, Colombia, South Africa, Guatemala, Belize, Trinidad. Now, if you look at these, you'll see that there are 3 Caribbean countries. The other thing you'll see is that Southern Africa and Colombia, which 20 years ago were described as a model of violence in the world, are no longer up there. All right, now, here's the first bombshell that should stay in your neocortex. If we look at the homicide rates spread across age by gender, something should strike us. So the red line represents female, the blue line represents male. And we use those gendered colors so they stay in your heads. If you look carefully, look at the homicide rate for birth to 14-year-old for boys, 2.5 per 100,000, 1.9 per 100,000 for girls. And those are mostly for triggerings. And we'll come back to these issues. When you get to the combatant age of 15 to 34, boom, 113 dead young men per 100,000. And we're going to compare that to Iraq at full-scale war. This is for the country of Jamaica. We're going to break this down later by parishes and by hubs, compared to 10.7 for girls. And then when we get to the older group, 36 per 100,000 for males, which means that even males above age 35, between 35 and 69, are above the what we call the Civil War benchmark. And the Civil War benchmark is 30 per 100,000, which I'll come back to. And then when it gets to persons who are 70 plus, males are 11 per 100,000, extremely high. You won't find this in a normal country, and 2.9 for women. If you look at the situation for women, it really has no major peak. Okay, it bellies out at 10.7 and 9.6, and then, but the curve is what we call a moderate curve. When you look at that of men, it literally looks like a volcano. Now, let's break this down into the four groups of importance to us. 50%, 50.015% of all the people who die in Jamaica literally are males between the age of 15 to 34. That's crazy, because they barely make up 20% of the population. That's really seriously crazy. And then when we look at the males in the other group, they make up 37. And then all other males and all women literally make up 13% of Jamaica. Now you can understand when I'm doing a presentation and I'm being asked questions about violence against women, why, even though I hide my emotions, as a scientist, there's a part of me that really gets triggered, because how can we spend all this amount of money on that 13%, ignoring the 87%? That strategy alone is going to run us into problems, not just psychologically, not just scientifically, but it's going to run us into some social disaster. And I keep reminding people that if your focus is on the fat puppies, you cannot have them live amongst maga dog. If you're Jamaican, you'll understand what that means. And that's part of the developmental problem in the new world. Everybody says women and children, and if we even add and the aged, they add up to 13%. The 87%, if you take care of that 13% and leave them among the 87%, they will not survive. So here is another diagram, another chart showing you the direction. Now let me give you the average for the world immediately so it makes sense to you. 18% of all persons killed in the world are women. In Europe, 30%. In the United States, 30%. Okay? In the Arabic world, 24%. Now, in Jamaica, 9.4% of all persons killed in Jamaica are women. That is an indicator that the country is a war zone in which the principles of not killing women and children because they have to replace us when we kill each other applies. So now let's break this down now into parishes in Jamaica. You will see that it is actually on a continuum, with Kingston at the end with a homicide rate. Let's look at the dark red line, male combatants between 15 and 34. So let me begin with the green line. The green line is what is called the Civil War benchmark. Now, the Civil War benchmark started out being produced by two scholars, right? Sambanis and Dole. My group at London, we were asked to criticize this benchmark because simply there are countries such as Jamaica where if 1,000 people dying, it's more than that. And if you look at countries, for example, St. Kitts and those countries where I also have to do some work, you'll see that if 1,000 persons, which was a benchmark used by Dole and Sambanis, if 1,000 persons out of 65,000, a lot of the countries I work in have populations below 60,000. If you kill 1,000 people, it's genocide. It's not a civil war benchmark. And so we had to change that. And so we were asked in our violence studies group in 2005 to start working on a new benchmark for the world. And what we came up with was 30 per 100,000, because we found that all the countries with homicide rates above 30 per 100,000 had all the characteristics of a civil war benchmark, of a civil war. So that green line represents a civil war benchmark. Please note that only Portland in Jamaica is below the civil war benchmark. It means Jamaica is an excessively violent space. Now let's take the purple line. The purple line came from my friends who worked in the trenches of doing research in Iraq at full-scale war, and who provided me with the data that the homicide rate in Iraq at full-scale war was 205. Now we're going to pay attention to those zones in Jamaica and people in Jamaica, or group in Jamaica, or sect in Jamaica that exceeds Iraq at full-scale war. Clearly, that would be males in Kingston and St. James. And if you look at males overall in Kingston alone, they too would exceed, including old men. So let's go. So clearly, Kingston and St. James are the epicenters with combatants' body count exceeding Iraq at full-scale war, and our fire techniques have helped to spread the fire to the other areas as gangs adapt to suppression. So the more we suppress gangs is the more they adapt. And we've been saying to people, develop what we call a water technique, which is quieter and more effective, built on science. Now, those are the two hubs in Jamaica. You'll notice the homicide rates. And by the way, this is using data from 2010 to 2018. What you'll see here is Hanover. You'll see St. James, that's the code JAM, 101 per 100,000, and then you'll see the daughters and sisters of that zone. And then you'll come to Kingston with a homicide rate of 156, and then you'll see the other areas that are next to Kingston. And then you'll see the brown area, which is the St. James hub, moving into, of course, St. Elizabeth. And you'll notice Clarendon moving into, of course, Manchester. For those of you who are not aware, a few years ago, extortionists actually drove into Manchester, gave out flyers to people to say, we are taking over your city. Now, much of our development is built on misconceptions and misinformation. There's a difference. Misconceptions mean you are innocent. You really don't know what you're saying. Misinformation means you are deliberate. And I'm using both words because in my work on the ground and in speaking with development people, some of them actually know better. And that means they are misinforming persons and not just having misconceptions themselves. Does the moral panic about violence against women make sense? Yes. And in fact, some people would say, hell yeah, right? For core reasons. And here are the reasons. Women are more important to reproduction. Hence, any area at all that is violent, you are going to pay attention to the persons who are going to replace you when you kill yourselves. And that is why every war, game of theory, right? Game theory of war, never ever kill women and children because they will replace you. And if you notice, the more campaigns we have about women and children, it tells you the more violent we are. A lot of people haven't thought this true, but it is true. Notice only 1/3 of women killed in gang war were ever involved in any way at all. So 2/3 of the women who are killed in gang wars were honestly innocent bystanders. That doesn't accrue to males. The bulk of males killed in a gang war were involved. And that's a reason for us to make a moral panic about violence against women. Colonized countries are more protective of women. Okay, and that's very clear. If I go back to the data, out of every 100 persons killed in the UK, you'll see between 29 or 30, depending on the year. Not so in Jamaica, it's 9.4. 37% of our children have neither a biological father nor a father figure, and therefore mother is the critical center of our survivability, not just survival, but our capacity to survive in Jamaica. And therefore, we have to make a lot of fuss about women and children. But we have to go beyond that. That's the point I'm making. Number 4, violence against women starts a cycle of violence because hurt women produce very scary men. So we understand that. And the last one is that billions of investment in campaigns to protect women and girls have been used in this region. And this is why I have said to people categorically, when invited to speak about Black Lives Matter, I have said to them, George Floyd's ghost will not haunt us for long. And I've never been wrong on these things. What is the implication? What we're looking at here is, and these are some data you hear people spew out. Jamaican women are among the top 5 women in the world being killed. Jamaica is ranked 4th in the world. So if Jamaica is ranked 4th in the world, you would expect anybody who lives here to be in the top 5 highest risk. And so we have to be very careful how people twist and turn and play around with data just to make a point, you know, and we have to apply common sense. But if you look at this, if you look at Jamaica, Belize, and Trinidad, where I've spent literally the bulk of my life working, what's going to be clear to you is that every time violence against men commit violence against men, move in a direction, violence against women move in the same direction. And that should tell us something. It is actually a corollary of men's violence against men. How do we know? Because in 2016, a group of women in the UK sent us some money to answer the question, why are women dying in Jamaica? Why is Jamaica so weird? And contractually, they refused to be named, and so I shall not name them. But I can tell you, we did the study. We took 4 years and we got 87% of neighbors and family members having clear certainty as to why their family or neighbors died. And so we're going to provide you with the data. Now, if you notice, 64% of all women who die in Jamaica die because of men's gang wars. This means that the most effective way to reduce the death of young women is to save young men. And this is precisely why on the back of the door of my Violence Studies Center back in London says, if you save one perpetrator, chances are you've saved 100 victims. It actually took me a while to understand what the heck could these people be saying. Save one perpetrator. That's not how I grew up. I grew up paying attention to the victim. But by the time you got to the second semester of violence studies, it made clear sense. If you save one perpetrator, right? Understanding that every perpetrator you see minus 3% are also victims, you are saving the persons they would have victimized. Makes complete sense to me, but it does take some time and a change of understanding of violence to be able to understand this thing. One massive error that serves only the purpose of campaigns and media presentations is the focus on the 21% of women who die by the hands of men in IPV. Shocker. Only 21% of women who die in Jamaica die as a result of a conflict with their intimate partner, being a man, that is. And yet we ignore the 11% who die direct violence and contract killings by other women in what we call in Jamaica, Métis war. And so there are so much tons and tons of hypocrisy and misinformation and misdirection around violence against women that people seem not to want to address because it doesn't really bring in the funding from North America and Europe. And whilst I wish the funding to continue, and I will never have anything against the persons who can attract funding, some amount of science must also enter. Empower young men as we empower young women, and believe me, the murder of our women will reduce dramatically. So let's break this down for you. 32% of women who are killed in Jamaica were killed to trigger a war. 13% are killed as informers. 8% of the women who are killed in Jamaica were gang war strategists. And oh my goodness, I've spent a lot of time around these women who strategize war, quietly. 11% gang family wipeout. All of those are related to gang. And then we get to 11% female contract killings. Call somebody to kill matey. In fact, somebody asked me the other day to look back at the data, and we sat down together and we saw that wives were winning the war, the matey wife war. So the first partner was winning the war. And, you know, I as these women said to me, sir, but wifey I win, man, matey I suffer. You know, that's the kind of discussions that we have when we sit down together, you know, and most of my team members, by the way, are women working through these things because there's a real war going on. And sadly, family rivalry, see this thing we call family land, doing a major damage in Jamaica, dead left, and you are all aware of those terms. And of course, IPV 21%. This is the kind of approach that we need to look at violence in Jamaica, whether it's violence against women, which is the 9.4%, or violence against anybody. So force has some limits, and we've been depending on force a lot in this region. Not just us, El Salvador, Guatemala, all the countries in trouble have been investing large amounts of money on suppression. But if we're going to use force, it needs to have the right mix between force and intervention. It needs to be swift and short, not prolonged, or you lose the tractions gain. It needs to be a 3-tier system, which I'm going to show you, primary, secondary, and tertiary. It needs legitimacy from a government that is popular, right? And everybody should know by now that violence works better in dictatorship than in democracies. So this is what we call a tripartite system of addressing violence. Violence, by the way, is a byproduct of social ills. If you don't have social ills, you're not going to have violence. Humans are aggressive. Men are far more aggressive than women. We're 17.2% bigger. We're over 24% stronger. Our entire, in fact, almost a half of our Y chromosome is based on the instinct of protection, and protectors are also aggressive. But this does not become violence until the floor of a society is damaged. What do we mean by the floor of a society being damaged? The primaries. Let's look at the primaries. So when you think about primary, we think of the characteristics of preventative. But when you look at the contributing interventions, it makes sense. At the individual level, humans must have education or training of some sort. Even in pre-developed societies, boys and girls have to be trained in something. You can't have people walking around untrained. Parents must have some idea of how to raise children. And so, and you must have preventative alternative justice. You must have interventions. You must have mentorship. So if you look at countries like Germany, where once you graduate, you have to get a mentor, you have on-the-job training, you have all of these things operating, these things will make sense. Look at all the countries that have done well, all the countries that I have visited and have worked with governments to understand what they're doing. All of these countries will show you that you can't have people described as unattached. That means your entire floor is damaged. And then at the community level, we have economic opportunities that afford ontological security to all. Or we come back to this word called ontological security. You have changing violence norms, interventions in community institutions, and changing mindset from revenge to repair. All of that is on the base. Then we get to secondary, which is about the curative and the visible. And this is where governments win elections. They do things that everybody can see. So they're called the visibles. And at this level, you have conflict resolution, you have counseling, you have social welfare, you have temporary jobs and projects, you have restorative justice to reduce vendetta and feud, and the massive one, and I've put this in bold, redeployment of combatants. If you look at Chicago Cure, if you look at all of these programs that have worked across the world, there are about 27 of popular ones. You'll all see that they are built on redeployment. Now, there are some people you cannot redeploy. If I'm making $50 million and I'm buying Mark Hex, not X, please note the pronunciation, Mark Hex, and I'm buying all sorts of fancy cars and so forth, it's difficult to redeploy me unless you are extremely wealthy. But the data show that we can redeploy up to 95% of young people in Jamaica. And if you can work with 95%, you cannot complain about the other 5%. That would say you're too greedy. And then we will go to the tertiaries. Tertiaries, of course, we know are the ones that give us quick relief. Like, oh, thank God this was done. And you know the sad thing about the sad reality about developing countries? People like relief because they've suffered for so long, they like relief. So let's start from the ones which we consider to be the dumbest, gun amnesty. I have never seen a gun get up and shoot somebody in my life. I have been to so many countries, I've worked with so many countries, stopping them from paying people to bring in old rusty guns and use the money to go and buy newer guns. Those kinds of stuff, we have to step past them. And even if you want to do them, I have no problem with people doing tertiaries because tertiaries make people think you look busy. But the truth of the matter is you have to do secondary and primary work. So peace treaties and ceasefires, I think I have done about at least 50 peace treaties with gangs, just to allow space and work. States of emergency and other forms of violence suppression, relocation of the problem, good praying and peace marches. You know these things. Nothing is wrong with tertiaries. They help you get a little bit of fresh air. You can go, whew. But if you don't do the secondaries and the primaries, believe me, the maximum time we get from the longest I've seen is 24 months. You can have a ceasefire for 24 months without work before, of course, clearly people begin to regroup. Now, here is the homicide rate in a graph from 1960, and I took the first 2 years before independence to make a point. Before independence, Jamaica's homicide rate was, of course, less than 5 per 100,000. Even through independence, Jamaica's homicide rate was 4.6 per 100,000. And then, of course, we started to see violence and we put in the first block, the Suppression of Crime Act in 1974, and boom, fire fighting fire created the precise segmentary factionalism. Big word, I'll explain what it means. It means that labor rights and comrades began to see themselves as being more important than the country and created this faction. And believe me, only 6% of Jamaicans are not a part of this faction. 6%. In the United States, it's over a third. In the UK, it's over a third. In developed countries, it's over a third. In most countries in the LAC, it's less than 10%. So politics continue to be central. And in 1980, we know over 800 young men killed themselves. And we call that social suicide. And then, of course, we had a peaceful period, relatively, at 21 per 100,000 because there was no competitive election. So 1983, 1989, and then we started again. And then we started again and we went on until boom, 2005, Jamaica was ranked the happiest country in the world and also the most violent country in the world. That is called serious social bipolarity. How can you be the #1 killing field in the world and be the happiest ranked by a study in the United States? But that tells you that by that stage, we had come to terms with the fact that we're violent. And then, of course, we had the trench called the Tivoli Trench, which you'll see there looks like a W, right? 2010 to 2014 is called a trench. And then no social programs, no category, no primaries, no increase in secondaries. And then boom, we're back by 2017. And now we have, of course, suppression and COVID. So you see a leveling off at 48 per 100,000. That's Jamaica's violent history, post-independent history. What is the principle of ontological security? Ontological security, the principle say, is about the idea of persons who have a sense of tomorrow or no sense of tomorrow. So if I have a sense of tomorrow and you have no sense of tomorrow, we are ranked very differently. One is high risk, the other one is low risk or no risk to harming others and harming self. Okay, so let me illustrate, let me not rush and illustrate to you how we check out ontological security. We asked the question, and I'm being reminded now of when I used to work at the hospital, at one of the hospitals in London. And I was on a group called Suicide Watch. And I was intrigued. In my training, they said, here are the people that you are responsible for. So I was given a list of 62 people that I was responsible for. That's my cadre. And I need to keep these 62 people alive. And of course, for that, I'd get some money to help pay down on the 16,000 UK pound sterling, of course, which you know is horribly expensive education in the United Kingdom. And so I had my 62 people, and every evening I had to call my 62 people. Hi, baby cakes, how are you doing? Oh, Herbs, I'm so good. I am so fabulous. I'm giving God thanks. You tick that one off, then you call another one. Hi, Deb, how are you doing? Oh, I'm so good, my love. And then you call another one and you go, hi, Johnny, or Emma, how are you? Right? Most of the people I had on my watch, I had only 10 were women. I am not good. I am so not good. And they say, oh, wow, what happened now? And you listen. And then you say, so what are you having for breakfast tomorrow? I don't care about any breakfast. You have to dispatch a team, because if the person doesn't care about breakfast, chances are the person is going to kill themselves. Now, if you call somebody and she complains, I don't care, I'm going to kill myself. And you say, what are you going to have for breakfast? Can I come and join us for breakfast? Oh, yes, Herbs, you can come and have breakfast with me, because I'm not having any continental in the morning. I'm going to have me some pineapples. I'm going to have that breakfast is too elaborate. You're not going to kill yourself. So let's move over to young people. We ask young people, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? And one third of Caribbean, of not just Jamaica, 1/3 of young men and 5% of young women. Listen carefully, look at the gap, look at where we've arrived. 1/3 of young men have no idea at all about the future. And that's a dangerous space to live in. So in 2001 in a class, we were asked, the 17 of us who were supposed to become violence experts, we were asked to carry out an assignment. All of you are going to take on all the countries you have a connection with, and you are going to work with those countries. Together, we came up with 127 countries, and we were asked, so I would work, of course, in Belize, Trinidad, Antigua, and I worked in 20-odd countries. Right. And then the question was, ask these young people, what is it they need to have a sense of future? Because if they have a sense of future, then those countries' violence would go down. Now, let's look at what we found. What we found when we did that is this idea of what really is going on in countries. We found four blocks. Food, okay, food. A safe community or family. Parental and community support, and training. And I'll skip a bit of this because I want to talk to you a little bit about risk levels that we found. We found, so you'll see us divide this into 5 risk levels. Shotters are repeat killers. These are persons who kill more than once. Some are actually professional killers. High, which is extremely high exposure to warfare, evidence of killing at least once. So that's high. Medium, high exposure to violence, but medium response, such as non-fatal shootings or stabbings and beating up people repeatedly, involvement in a crew or gang, but no evidence of deep involvement. Low, meaning medium to high indirect exposure, low exposure to graphic violence, but unnoticeable response, such as just fights. And then shielded. That's the group I love. Young people who are shielded from extreme violence by parents and community, such as myself. I grew up in Savlamar, for those who know. I grew up around Guncoat Lawn. Imagine a place called Guncoat Lawn. But I was the nerd that everybody protected. You couldn't touch me when I was growing up in Savlamar. I would have to beg for people who were trying to harm me for them not to be harmed by my protectors. And my protectors would be male, female, anybody. When do you? Leave the little nerdy boy alone. Those kids, we want to talk about those kids too. So if you look now, this is the first area we want to look at. We're looking here at issues surrounding food. Look at what's happening here. This is male, this is female. You can see the difference. Okay. We know so far from the 4 major studies in Jamaica, 0.5% or 1 out of every 200 inner city males, and all of this is about the age 15 to 34, right? 1 out of every 200 inner city males between the ages of 15 to 34 is a shutter. 1 out of every 200. That's a lot. And this small groups accounts for 50% of murders in Kingston and St. James. 5% or 1 out of 20 inner city males have killed somebody. That's between the age of 15 and 34. And here's what people don't know. 1 out of every 200 inner city females has either killed someone or set up someone to be killed. The core victims are mateys, partners, crew members, contracted sleepies. These are persons who are invited for sex and killed during the process. But 1 of 7 inner city male youth and 1 of 3 female fiercely protected by family and even community. Now, the most basic physiological needs. Jamaican males are 2.7 times more likely to be underweight, birth to 5 years old. And this is the Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions. This is not my work. 8.8% of boys born in Jamaica will be overweight, compared to 3.3% of girls. UNICEF shows that from birth, even for breastfeeding, girls are twice better breastfed than boys. Shocker. Why? Please do not begin to blame mothers. This has nothing to do with mothers being good or bad. This has to do with the fact that in a war zone, you have to begin to teach your boys to be tough. And mothers genuinely think they're doing the correct thing by toughening up their boys because the environment in which they live is harsh. So let me go again. This is not about blaming mothers. Mothers did it for a neurobiological reason. This is the same patterns for males 15 to 24 years old. And this is the most graphic in the inner city. When it comes to food, it's the same thing. Food, something as basic as food. The problem for inner city young men is that they must provide food for themselves as well as their families, mother, sister, and other siblings. For young females, their concern are for self or their children if they get pregnant. And their support system is over 3 times more powerful and more expansive than for males. So what we're saying here is that when you look at inner city girls, when you look at girls and boys who grow up in violence, the girls have there's less dependence on the girls for her to get money. So therefore she's not pushed into crime. And she also has a support system that is over 3 times more powerful. Now let's look at some of the figures. This is food. If you look at, we're comparing St. James and St. Catherine Urban, meaning Spanish Town. Let's just say it's Spanish Town, right? And Manchester Urban, meaning if you're from the center of the country, you know Manchester very well. We're talking about the 18 poor communities in Manchester. The other communities in Manchester are quite fine. And if you look carefully, you'll see that in Montego Bay, 27% of males, again, 15 to 20, this is 15 to 24, not 15 to 34. These are the core of youth, have food insecurity, meaning they are hungry for prolonged periods of time. All right. And there's a 19% in Manchester for girls being suicidal or depressed. I have to take half a minute to explain that. What happens is that mating rituals in Manchester is the most expensive in Jamaica. When my students found out, they were in shock. They're like, seriously, sir? You can actually have dating and people ask the question, do you have a house? Do you have a car? Those are the central questions that we picked up. And therefore, the women who are not dating in Manchester they reported being depressed. Okay, let's move. So if you break down chronic hunger by levels of risk, okay, here's your revelation. 52% of shutters reported before becoming shutters, right, and before being employed as killers, were chronically hungry. High, 43%, medium, 25%, low, 21%, and the shielded boys, only 10% of them suffered chronic hunger. It means food. When young men say we're going to go eat a food, we have to take them seriously. Let's take this issue of who is assisting the family and who is responsible for the family. Again, these are kids. These are 15 to 24-year-old. In St. James, 70% of males, 15 to 24, not 34, 15 to 24, were actually assisting in providing for their families. And 36% of them, and 17% of them, they were carrying the family alone. 36% of women of that age were assisting, and 7% of them carrying their families alone. And believe me, and I'll tell you how even as researchers, these things affect us. Half the team were crying for the 7% of the females who are carrying their family alone, even while being youth. It is much easier for us to cry for women because that's nature. But 17% in Montego Bay, I'm using Montego Bay to show you, 17% of Montego Bay kids between 15 and 24, being the only person employed is a tragedy. So let's take this breakdown now by the 5 blocks. Exact same thing as the hunger. It's actually almost a photo of it. In other words, what we're saying, you don't want to have a community and 50% of your young men are actually carrying their families alone. It means that a lot of those are shutters. So let's go. Sense and reality of security, because in order for you to be stable, you actually need a sense of reality, a sense of security. Right now, if we go into the most peaceful inner city communities, and not all inner city communities are extremely violent, some are peaceful, you will see 17% of fathers that are in prison compared to the most violent 37% of fathers that are in prison. And again, 10% of the mothers that are in prison in the peaceful ones, and 15%. There's a drama that people actually think, and this is fascinating. You ask somebody on the street, what's causing the violence in Jamaica? Oh, single mother man, father absence man. Here are the data. Listen. The average killer in Jamaica has neither mother nor father. The human species requires at least one stable parent. So if a boy lives with his mother and his mother is employed and stable, the boy will be stable for 97% of the time. If a boy lives with his mother alone and the mother is unstable, that boy is likely to be recruited into gangs. Shall we stop this idea? So the men say it's single mother, that's sexist. The women say it's father absent, that's also sexist. And so we have to stop working with these sexist ideas that people spread around because they make no sense. So here is the counter data. The highest performing students at universities in the Western Hemisphere, the highest performing students have no father. Men, I know this hurts, but I still have to tell the data. Why? Because their mothers can emotionally blackmail them and motivate them that she needs to be rescued by these boys. And based on a principle called monotrophy, as in the link between boys and their mothers, these boys will work to the point of tears to ensure they do well in school. They are more motivated than the more stable kids. But those mothers must have a strong support system of men and women outside of the home and within the home. Okay? So the next time we hear these data about single mother on one side, father absence on the other side, let's be a little bit more scientific about it. So let's look at father presence. The national figures show that 42% of Jamaican children today have a biological father in their home, and 82% of mothers, of families, right, birth to 8 years old, especially young children, have an active mother, have a mother, rather, not an active mother. When you go to the inner city, that drops from 42 to 21% and drop from 82% to 43%. In other words, it is not just father absence or mother absence, it is both. Both of them have dropped by approximately 50%. Now, if you look at inner city males who kill, you will see that their fathers drop a little bit, literally about 15% drops down. But the mother drops into crisis, and that's why it's in red. In other words, when you work with boys who've killed somebody, they normally have a mother crisis as well as a father crisis, but their mother crisis exceeds their father crisis. That's called fractured monotrophy. When you look at girls, you will see the opposite. Their mother's not so bad, but their father relationship or relationship with father and stepfather in crisis. So it works the opposite direction, not the direction we think. Fathers have a greater impact on their daughters. Mothers have a greater impact on their sons. Don't mess with Sigmund Freud. He had it right all along that our relationships of critical emotional importance are cross-sex, not straight or parallel sex. Let's look at the scores. Inner city males, and by the way, these are scores where we ask the children to score their parents. You'll see the same thing. 70% of mothers got good scores, 36% of fathers got scores. When the males turn killers, the mothers score from 70 drops all the way down to 22. The boys who are killing are having a mother crisis primarily and a father crisis secondarily. Shall we go? Let's get to the end. Now, if you look at shielded males compared to all other high-risk males, something hits your eyes immediately. We have to be concerned about children who come from crime families because shielded males are 17.3 times less likely to come from a crime family. They are 5.4 times less likely to be tortured by especially their mothers. They are 3.6 times less likely to be hungry continuously. They are 3.1 times less likely to see their father battering their mother or their mother battering their father. They are 2.7 times less likely to drop out of school. And they are 2.5 times less likely to be carrying the burden of their family. They are shielded. Even in the heart of violence, they are privileged. And those kids will not kill. Now, we're at the end. My students came up with the idea. They said, sir, we need to create a baseline. We need to create a baseline. And I said, I'm listening. Sir, do you notice that the kids who end up in university or end up doing CAPE actually don't harm people? And so we sat down in my office, on the floor, and we started looking, and it took us about 18 hours combing through the data, recoding the data, setting up in packages, all the kids who were in, I'm telling you, right into daylight, into another day. We sat there working through the data, cutting, first of all the young men from 5 different data sets and gradually working until we got to the point where we could create a baseline. See, one slide, hours of work. What we're able to do is to take all the young people who fell out, right, before grade 9. So they dropped out of school, and we use that as a baseline. And what did we find? If a boy was able to complete secondary school and sit at least 3 CXCs, he was 4 times less likely to be high risk, meaning kill somebody or being stabbed up. And that intrigues us because some of these boys did not even pass the exam. So it's not about their capacity to do well in school that's important. What was important is the capacity around them to support them enough to stay in school to the point where they could do the 3 CXCs, which is absolutely almost useless, really. And then if the parents and the family and the community and everybody push them to the point where they sat Cape, they were 10 times safer. And here is the bombshell. If they ever made it to college, teachers college that is, or university, they were 85 times safer. Where do we go? Violence is a byproduct of social ills. It's not something that people can stay in their bathrooms and have a gut feeling and try to negotiate whether it's, a stomach bug or common sense. When I came back from England, trained in violence studies and anthropology, I was in shock that Jamaica didn't really need me. No, this is sarcasm. Because everybody told me, we know what to do. In fact, when I went to Belize to start working, people said, well, then bring this man come here for. We know the problem. And I remember saying on radio, Creme Radio in Belize, first of all, before I went to RJ and others and started to say the same thing. Would you say you know what a doctor does? Somebody said, no, they use a lot of big words. Oh, so do I need to use big words for you to understand that I know what I'm saying? And persons have been honest about it when they get the chance to think about it. They go, it's true. So if I spend 8 years and then 20 odd years in the field, you actually think you and I have the same degree of knowledge? Recently, I had to ask someone, do you go to your neighbor to ask, should I take the vaccine? Or do you ask a doctor? And so this is part of the problem that a lot of us think we know. In fact, it got so bad that somebody who has no training at all went on television to say she can teach me a few things about violence because I did not include an area of violence that she thought was important. And we literally had to take a break, a commercial break, because I had got to the point of not being able to understand why on earth people think they understand violence to that extent without training. So violence is a byproduct. If you address violence in the way of producing more violence, it will not go away. How do we then gather material to understand violence? I have presented to you some material from about 5 different studies, which are very small. In 2008, a young man threw a hand grenade in a bar or a pub, if you prefer, in Belize, killing a few members of the other gang. In Belize, they have Crips and Blood. I was called in. Today, the homicide rate is half as much as it was, having worked with that group. And it needs to get better, and I need to continue working with them. Trinidad then asked for an audit, and that was done. Jamaica has not yet done what is considered to be a full and national violence audit, which allows us to understand some core things. Where is the violence happening? How is it happening? What are the resources on the ground? Because you can't go into people's community if they already have resources can work. You need to activate those resources. All of these things come together to create an audit. What type of violence? There are 4 different types of violence running. Which of them are operative here? What's the security? What's the ontological security of young men? When you're through doing that, you are then able to create what is called a violence reduction plan. And this needs to be broken down into 15 years and 5 years and yearly breakouts, because people need to know, people don't think about 15 years from now. even though you need 15 years to effect a full violence reduction plan. And this is the weakness in violence reduction plans, because suppression immediately yield results and make you look happy. But we have to begin to do this work. This is where I want to say, welcome to the team of people who know that this work needs to be done in the region. God bless. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. That was an amazing, amazing, amazing presentation, Dr. Gayle. And I know I'm not alone in that thought process. So I just wanted to keep you, hold you hostage a little bit longer to just get some questions answered. We do have some questions here in the chat that some of our attendees have placed here to just get some further information. I have a question here from Dr. Davidson in regards to, and I think you kind of answered this a little bit, but basically in regards to whether or not you've shared your findings and your work with members of leadership and members of parliament on the island, and if anything, have you gotten any feedback as it regards to your work?
Okay, currently that is happening.
Okay. So
that's the good news.
All right.
That's the short version.
Oh, this is the short version. Okay. All right. Well, that is, I'm intrigued to see what type of information comes out of that audit when it is finally done in Jamaica. Let's see. This question is from Dr. Alan Cunningham. What is the single most important variable that needs our urgent attention to create meaningful change?
When you look at, first of all, in order for gang violence to be effective, the gangs need to adapt to whatever the government does. So if the government does A, the gangs need to have a plan called A1, and the gangs need to be ahead of the state at all times. But when the state is informed, it becomes more difficult for the gangs to be ahead of them. Let me give you an example. They came up with an idea when we had the Tivoli incursion. Some people don't like the word, but that's the word that's most popular. Belize immediately created something called Operation Jaguar. And I had to sit with people and say, please. And I sat with the young men, and the young men said to me, Dr. Herbs, no watch no face, man. No watch no face. Jaguar is a puss. Jaguar only operate when it dry. Puss not like rain. And a lot of young people got killed during the rains in Belize. It may sound like a shocker to you, but the gang members literally says, if it name Operation Jaguar, watch we. And as simplistic as these things sound, gangs actually take governments for a joke because they become so organized, some of them with 5, 6, 7, 8. I know gangs with 17 countries under their belt. And they become, of course, transatlantic confederations rather than gangs. And it means when they get that big, they are able to fund tons and tons of monies underground. Because the number one reason a boy joins a gang is because he is a damaged family. The number 2 reason is economics. But what's important here is that when you go to countries that have actually dried up the pool from which gangs recruit, gangs become ineffective. Now, let me tell you how bad it is. I took the time to interview 18 dons in 1 week. I've interviewed hundreds of dons, but this is a specific project. I wanted to hear from dons whether or not they were scared of their gang members. And I interviewed 18 of them 1 week, and all 18 of them said, yes, in Jamaica, I'm afraid of the shutters. Why are you afraid of the shutters? Most of them can't read. They're angry all the time. They say that nobody loved them. and therefore I cannot rely on them for loyalty. Now, if Dons are saying that about the gang members they have. And so I proceeded to ask them, what would happen if these gang members were educated? Herbs, they would kill less. And if they kill less, I would be able to operate and sell my drugs quietly, because it's when they kill, the police attack us. In other words, we've got to the point where our kids are so untrained, their ontological security is so poor that Dons are recommending that they be trained. And I think for me, that is the biggest crisis when you look at the 4 blocks: the food, the sense of security, the supportive parents, the lack of training. The ontological security of young men must be addressed. In fact, we sat down and did something called projection extrapolation frames. We created some frames, and we found that if boys were brought up to 75% of the ontological security of girls, our murders would drop by 50%. It is so bad in Jamaica. Being a boy, an inner city boy in Jamaica, is not worth telling anybody about.
Wow. Okay. All right. So I do have 2 individuals with their hands raised. And then I have a couple more questions here in the chat, and then we're going to kind of close up your Q&A here. So I want to get to Jamlia real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, or ask you to unmute so you can go ahead and ask your question. All right. So you should be able to unmute. All right, we can't hear you. So go ahead. Once I ask you to unmute, you start.
Now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, hi, how you doing?
Doing wonderful.
I'm just coming in from work, so I'm very sorry. I didn't think I was gonna make it. Again, let me introduce myself. I'm Dawn Riley, no longer Sherrod. I'm the president of the Jamaican American Law Enforcement Association. We're basically civilians and officers in NYPD that feel the need to share our experience and come to the table to see how we can better help Jamaica's people and everything like that. I kind of don't have a question in a way. My thing is that you have to realize there's many fundamentals, because for years, America have been dealing with domestic violence situations. They've been dealing with all the components you're speaking of. And a lot of times we have to realize there are components that we do not expect to have to deal with. To make it short, we have a lot of programs that if you're interested in implementing or copying or whatever you need, we're here to help you. So we have been dealing with this problem for a long time. I myself am a sergeant in the NYPD, as I said. I have 2 sons, and I raised them at a time in which it was taught upon to be Black men do not reach the age of 21 in New York. And that may have been other people's story, but like my sons would say, that's not the Jamaican thing. Both my sons graduated college, and both my sons are now doing whatever they do with that degree nowadays that these children do. I really don't understand them. But I think, and I believe that there are numerous programs and numerous things we can do to incorporate women, like women leadership courses are the big things right now, because if a woman is able to lead, to guide her household, and she is the first teacher. So we have to remember that as being the first teacher, what she teach her children is imperative. And also men, realize that if you grow up in a violent environment, the odds are stacked on you to be violent. And when you're violent, you usually strike out against the most vulnerable in our society, which are women and our children. Like I say, again, you caught me off guard because I wasn't even ready.
You're fine. Your hand was raised, so I thought that you had a question.
I think I hit the button when I was taking off my jacket. I'm sorry.
Got it.
But I'm always ready to help. I'm always ready to help.
Well,
so
no.
We're here for
everything it's saying, we're going to segue to in just a second. So I definitely want you to keep all of your ideas, all of your programs and plans and them for me, because they will be useful, and we're gonna segue into that. So I'm gonna go ahead and place you back on mute. Not a problem.
Okay.
All right. Dean Roden, do you have a question? If you can just shake your head. Yes. All right, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you real quick. All right, you're good. Once I go ahead, there you are.
Yeah, good evening. All protocol observed. Dr. Gayle, I think you did a tremendous job. I am Dean Roden. I've been a scout leader for over 30 years. I've been living in the Augustown Hermitage area from 1961. I grew up with some of Jamaica's most dangerous men. I can talk from experience. Go to scouting. Up until today date, I've never lighted a cigarette. My mom, my dad, they're the most strictest person. So it doesn't matter where you come from, you don't have to join all these people. I just said, being a nerd, although you're in those community, the guys around you said, listen, Mr. Roden, Mr. Roden, these are strict parents. So I am one of those parents that believe that a mother and a father, they have to do a balanced thing for a child. But whatever you have, whether it be a mother and a father, parenthood really work. And right now, especially in Augustown, they are going through a crisis. And I'm an advocate for young men. And I'm going to need all the resources here tonight. I'm not the person that did the phantom thing. I'm on the ground, and there are need for all that you have said. There are young men right now in Augustown that we have formed businesses, we have formed different groups, scout groups going to be starting. And I'm going to need not just a mouth talk from people here tonight. I'm going to need the support and the help from every member of the diaspora. Because sometimes they said, nobody no want nothing. But I can tell you, I've started a small business in Hermitage, and I've registered over 40 business people there in Hermitage. My son was born in Hermitage. He went to Jamaica College. He's a manager of cement, and he is very, very successful. But sometimes all they do, they need an opportunity. I could remember in the hot time, I've been in the state where people denied to even say they're a Jamaican, 1987. But I wear my uniform proudly as a Jamaican. Not only when Usain Bolt is winning the race, I'm a Jamaican. I'm a Jamaican 24/7. And right now, I'm going to need a support, because I can tell you, I've started an education program in Hermitage in the heat of the war. People would not even pass the university gate. And I would have that class with all those community meeting on Saturday, and education can break all barriers. Those guys would not fire one shot he's having his class. And I know education can do it. But now I need resources, and I need people to come on board with me. Because there's a group of people, I can remember when a couple of weeks ago, there was a killing in Augustown. And I tell you, it made news like all the pages. Before that, we had a wonderful program, Reggae Month. We talked to people who feed Bob Marley, Sasha, some great people we spoke with. Nobody respond to that. This is a problem. The negative is seen, and our young people think that's it, being an hero, doing negativism.
Well,
so okay, thank you.
No problem, Mr. Roden. What we're going to do, again, everything that you are speaking of is going to be segued and extremely useful once we start moving into our organized strategy here, okay? So thank you so much. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and unmute Dr. Dunkley. If we could, I'm gonna give you just about a minute here to go ahead and ask Dr. Gayle a question, and then we'll be moving into what our strategy is going to be as far as our task force.
Thank you so much, Ms. Grant. Yes, my question for you, Dr. Gayle, thanks for such a lucid presentation. You really illuminated many of the points that are of concern to us. In a recent discussion with the Deputy Prime Minister on crime and security, he informed us that it would be difficult to integrate the diaspora into crime fighting in Jamaica. That he found it difficult to integrate, difficult to collaborate with us. I'm asking you, Dr. Gayle, based on your expertise, where would you say immediately that the diaspora is able to fit? What would be the high points or the high leverage areas that we as a diaspora can contribute? Because this was quite stunning to hear the Deputy Prime Minister share those sentiments.
He needs to unmute, Angel.
Yeah, I just went ahead. Dr. Gayle, you should be unmuted.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
All right. So I have never in my life answered a question directly regarding what is stated by a politician, because I honestly don't know what was in his mind. I don't know where it was coming from. But what I can say, I can speak from my experience. So that is the direction I will take. If you look at the work in Belize, that's where I've done a lot of work, they worked with the diaspora. And quite often we look at the diaspora for only money. Let's just be very honest about it. We say, can you give us $100,000 US? Because, for example, an audit for Jamaica would cost about $500,000 US. And in any discussion I would have with anybody, I would say we would prefer if an audit is not completely funded by a government. And let me explain what that means. In Belize, Belize is the ideal case, because when I went to Belize, I said to them, I don't want the government to completely pay for this audit. And they said, why? And I said, because if the government owns it completely and they change from UDP to PUP, anything can happen. I am always concerned about this little word, ownership. Who owns the research? So we got the Rotary Club to start funding. We got their diaspora, people from Los Angeles. If you know Belize, you know Los Angeles is connected to them. In fact, that's where Crips and Blood in Belize came from, right? And so we had the funding coming from different directions. Churches, I remember a pastor came and gave us a check for $2,000 US. And by the time we were finished, we had 27 different bodies responsible for the research in Belize, which is why every time the research is put down on a shelf, somebody gets up and gets really, really angry and said, I did put my money in there. So ownership of something like a national audit is important for the diaspora to be a part of. But I want to move beyond money, because to be honest, when I was in England, and even my friends in the States tell me, Herbs, tell us straight up, Herbs, the only thing they want from is money. I believe that when you leave Jamaica, you become parts of bodies that have experience that can be adopted or transferred to Jamaica. And I think that is clearly one area in terms of expertise where I am certain diaspora groups can help the mother country or the core country. So those are the two areas that I see that from my experience in Belize has worked. We've had persons come in from California to work with us in Belize when we set up the secretariat in Belize called Restore Belize. We've had 4 countries, actually, diaspora people from 4 different countries coming to work with me when we set up the long-term plans in Belize. They've not been completely carried out, but it's a start, and the murders have actually gone down in Belize. So that's my experience, and that's the only point from which I can speak.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Gayle. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again. Let's see. Donovan, are you still here with me?
Yes, I am.
All right, so I did want to go ahead and move us into our actually how we're going to maneuver as the task force, and just the next strategies of what we're going to be doing with the three components of organize, strategize, and socialize. That's kind of our theme. So I wanted to give everyone an idea of what this looked like. So we do have the community outreach, and then we do have our crime intervention team, and then our communications team. I'm going to unmute Mrs. McIntyre Pike here, just so she can speak momentarily, especially as, on the community aspect and how important it is to develop those communities, and what that looks like in the long term to correcting and enhancing the, there we go, okay, I found her. To correcting and enhancing those particular communities to help reduce crime in the long term. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask Mrs. McIntyre Pike to unmute so that she can say a few words here. Diana, are you able to unmute there?
Yeah, just wanted to thank you for the opportunity because, you know, Dr. Gayle did a fantastic presentation as usual. He helped us in Manchester with identifying 18 at-risk communities. So our strategy has been over the years to focus on developing the communities for businesses. We call it villages as businesses. I'm very happy to have the partnership of one of our main diaspora persons here, Booty Page, CEO of Making Connections Work, and he has branded it community economic tourism, which we like because what it does is it drives home the fact that we are developing the economy of the communities. And when we do our training, it's entrepreneurship training, showing people how to be business people within their own environment. And we've been doing it for over 30 years in the Caribbean and here in Jamaica. And we've found it is very positive. Even potential criminals or ones who are involved have gravitated towards it because they see the potential of having that support. So I would recommend that we focus on education, educating in the diaspora. We have selected the diaspora as our main partners for investment as well as for training and whatever it is we're doing. I think it's better when it's done that way because the diaspora is larger and they have more expertise and so on that can help us. And everybody has to unite. And the final thing I'd like to say is that we're promoting community lifestyle vacations, which has been a fantastic program for visitors because they want to enjoy what we are, not create an attraction. And we have pick a project while on vacation and adopt a village while on vacation. And now we have moved it forward to have it even abroad. They can do it from abroad. And we're getting quite a few interests in that. And the diaspora, of course, can be a part of that once we identify the projects within communities. So I'm ready to move with the diaspora, with the community development through entrepreneurship training. We have UWI Open Campus as our partner, and we have our own organization, the Academy for Community Tourism. And thank you very much for this opportunity to share that.
Not a problem. Thank you so much, Diana. I think Donovan, if you can chime in here. I think what we've all taken from your presentation, Dr. Gayle, is how much how we as a task force are able to impact the crime rate in Jamaica is not just a one-stop shop solution, which is why we are going to, as a task force, move into getting organized first, because once we are organized with our different specialties and different expertise, then we can all move as a team and tackle this from different angles. If I'm stating this correctly, is that correct, Dr. Gayle? Perfect. So as you guys can see under the community outreach, we've got education and art that's going to be headed up by Dr. Clovis Nelson, social intervention strategies by Nathaniel Pete, business and sports by Dr. B. Roy Davidson. We've got youth and development and uniformed groups by Dean Roden, community Development by Diana McIntyre Pike. We have Faith-Based Initiatives by Michelle Bowen, Finance and Foundation Development, Nonprofit Administration is, so those things are still available. And we have Logistics by Ms. Beverly Johnson. That's going to be within our scope of community outreach. Now, what I'd like for you guys to do is once we are closing up with this meeting, there will be a document for those of you guys who have specialties or expertise in areas that could help within community outreach or could help with in our crime intervention team, where we have our legal work being handled by Wayne Golding and Michelle Fanger. We've got use of force expert Sophie James, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. We've got law enforcement strategist Captain Peter Whittingham. We've got Donovan Tate, who is well-versed on gangs, and Wilfred Rattigan, who is also well-versed on counterintelligence and strategy. So again, if you feel as though your expertise aligns with crime intervention, then once you fill out that form, go ahead and let us know that that's where you kind of want to sit. And then we also have communications, which we've got Rudy Page in our policy implementation. We've got projects implementation for Stafford Grant. We've got print communications with Lester Hines, technology and cyberspace with myself. We've got communication and protocol with Dr. Karen Dunkley, and then we've got Doreen Buckingham handling our magazine communications as well. So as you're seeing these different categories and these different groups and teams and things that align with certain things that may interest you or maybe within your wheelhouse, I'm going to drop the link in the chat for you guys to fill out, and we'll also place it in the WhatsApp group. But I definitely want to hear back from you guys as far as where your expertise lies. So I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but I'm gonna, hopefully I can send them over to you, Dr. Gayle, and you'll like send me an answer, maybe. Wink, no, maybe. Okay, I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed for that. But I would like to turn it over to Dr. Francis, so we can go ahead and just, again, show you even more appreciation for the work that you do, Dr. Gayle. Oh, let me make sure.
Unmute Dr. Francis.
I gotta make sure he's unmuted. Gotta find you, Dr. Francis. There you are.
Angel, can I just say something real quick before we get to Dr. Francis?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, the fact that Dr. Gayle, this is for you. Being a media personality, lately we've been hearing that music is one of the causes that influence the younger ghetto youths and the gang. And you know, I did a show the other day and I talked about how the churches can actually be impactful in helping to help solve some of these problems. Do you feel that that's a necessary situation where churches can become involved and get more? And then we can also have Michelle Bowen talk a bit about that as well. You can unmute, Dr.
I just have to, okay, there we are.
All right, so questions on, in fact, I see another question too. I was looking through the chat. Questions on music are very interesting, and it's an area I've had to address a lot, because it's fascinating when you look at the work of John Story, and he talks about how mass culture becomes high culture. You know, how Bob Marley, you know, was once considered to be, his music was dirty music until it became international and we could make money from it. Then, oh my goodness, it's such beautiful music. And, you know, and how we can predict that dance hall one day is going to become high culture because there's a beat that's faster or something, maybe 20 years from now. The truth of the matter is, what is music? It's media. Music actually helps to prevent violence more than it creates violence.
Thank you.
So if you take three young people, one is from a UM group, means upper middle class group, one is from a working class, and one is from an inner city, right? It's fascinating listening to UM children talk about, you know, music, you know, what's ramping shop, dad? What, you know, it's foreign to them. They have no idea. because it's not the aspect of the culture that makes sense to them. But a child who grows up every day hungry, and here, if I'm hungry again, you're going to see me 9, understands precisely. And the research shows that the bulk of them, 2/3 of them, will feel, by singing the song, will feel better. It's an expression of their anger, so they get it out. While 1/3 of them who are at a different frame with less support, less ontological security, will actually be triggered, because there are killers I know who, when they are going to kill, they play a certain dancehall song, which I won't name, but they've reported to me that they do so. So the research itself shows that whilst that there's a connection between the impact of music on ontological security. If my ontological security is fine, then the music is going to help me for entertainment or for so forth. If my ontological security is severely low, right, then it means that it can trigger me. And the scientific question that must flow from this is, do we change the music, or do we change the way we treat them? Because the music is clearly a corollary or an expression. There's a young man who came to teach my class one day. His name, I think, is Orville Hall. He's the head of a group called Dance Expressions. And he tracked for my students how dance hall lyrics changed with the economy. When the economy got better, the music changed. That Elephant Man and a lot of those dance moves came at a time when things were a little bit better. And then when things get really deep again, or an election is approaching, or the violence go up, then bad man songs go up. I mean, yes, I'm aware of music having this impact, but I never had the data. But this is a fellow who's done the work in music, and he showed me, and I sat with him. I said, no, man, you have to, because I got excited. You have to show me. And he said, sit there, look at how the song changed to throw the AK over the wall. That was a complete, it's the same rhythm, different song, different things happening in Jamaica. And so we clearly realized that for over 2/3 of people, music is an expression of what is happening, but it can trigger you, the ones who we treat the worst. And so the same question I asked in Belize, when people in Belize wrote me a very long letter of protest, a letter of protest to the researcher, can you imagine? The protest letter was, and it was published, why is Dr. Gayle promoting that the life in the prison, the central prison Colby in Belize, is better than for 15% of young men? We are embarrassed by it. You cannot do that. And I said, should we make the prisoner's life worse, or should you begin to take care of your 15%? Same question. You should be embarrassed that 15% of your young men live worse than in prison. And you should do something about it. You shouldn't go to the prison with placards to say, make their lives worse. You should be doing the opposite. And so it's the same way I want us to look at music. We should make the lives of young people so good that they have better songs to sing.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Dr. Francis, you can go ahead now.
Yes, good day. Good day again. I want to first of all apologize to those persons who did not get their questions in and were not named, initially. But this has been a process, and we had some issues in the beginning. I'm not doing the vote of thanks, but I just want to point those things out. I have never sat down anywhere that I was riveted. Camera proved me wrong. But I'm telling you, Dr. Gayle, I'm not doing a vote of thanks, but everyone here has learned today, and we want to see more of you. I want to say this too, that you can look forward to our support from the diaspora with any audit that you are doing. And that's what we want to do. We want to see changes in Jamaica. I want to see changes anywhere. And so we'll be having a lot of conversations. So man, you have to really look out for my number and duck me sometimes, So I will definitely, so I just want to say that to you. In regards to, I want to say, regard to these 3 categories here that we came up with, some are left off. And for example, Dr. of Florida, and we want to keep that, that institution. And we now have a Women of Hermitage also that we are involved with, and we have the Beacon of Hope by Rudy Pace. Many things that we are working on with the children and the young people, because we have learned so much now about men and women in Jamaica, and we need to take note and advise and educate those people about this situation. And we can work together. We are willing to work with you, any government, and at any time to make these things better. I would like to see, we would like to bridge the gap though between us as second-class citizens of our own. Stop talking and saying that we are not real Jamaicans because we left Jamaica and abandoned it. Well, I can assure you that was not the case. And we're not going into my story or anybody's story. But we love our country very much, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. We're spending our time on a Sunday afternoon to listen to good words and to be motivated to do what we have to do. Dr. Gayle, you have our support. I do not think we will be putting on this to discuss the categories, and if anybody else has any other categories, we'll be doing this and you'll be getting notes. Please send us your emails on the forum so that we can send you a copy of this as we move forward, and also to be able to communicate with you. The vote of thanks after I'm speaking, if you have any other questions, we can always address it to me, because I will still, this forum is finished. I want to thank you personally, Dr. Gayle, and you're just, boy, I tell you, what can I tell you? Leave it to Judge Hemmings to say that. Thank you very much. And of course, the team that helped me, Donovan and Angel. I'm sorry. Dr. Hemmings.
Yeah, this team has been remarkable in putting together this program, and kudos to each and every one of you. But Dr. Gayle, you were phenomenal, and you're known throughout the world for the work that you do. And we're just humbled and honored that you would have taken the time out today to speak to the Jamaican diaspora here, especially on this topic that has been so controversial because people just don't have the information. I had the opportunity to work on the Violence Reduction Partnership for the U.S. Department of Justice under the Obama administration. And everything that you've spoken about are all the things that we did in terms of the audit and putting in place a plan. But as you said, these things don't last if in democratic societies, which we love and cherish. But when you have a change of administrations and you have the programs being run out of a centralized government organization, such as in this case, and it was very well put together, the Department of Justice, what happens with the change of administration is that the plan's no longer in effect with the new administration. So one, we have to figure out as this task force, how it is that they're going to fund the audit, and how is it that they're going to put together a quasi-governmental entity that will be able to do the brilliant work that Dr. Gayle has spoken about. Secondly, it's so important for us to understand, as Dr. Gayle so eloquently described for us, that this is a holistic endeavor, and that we have to involve everyone. So it means that the churches, other not-for-profit organizations, as well as the commercial sector, have to get involved and to be an integral part. Academia, everyone has to be involved and an integral part in order for us to solve this problem on the island of Jamaica and elsewhere in the world. There's a person by the name of Joel Barker whose expertise, unlike Dr. Gayle, who is so brilliant, is in the area of the corporate world. But Joel Barker and later many universities adopted this mission statement. He said that vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision is just wasting time. But vision with action, that is what you're able to use to change the world. And Dr. Gayle, I think you have given us marching orders and information that this diaspora community can use to change our little island of Jamaica and to put in place a sustainable violence reduction partnership plan that will last no matter which government is in power. Thank you so very much for your words this evening and for your inspirational thoughts. Truly, this was a Sunday well spent. If I was in the pulpit, I'd be passing the plate right now.
Well said, Dr. Hemmings. Before we go, Angel, and before we wrap up, let's recognize, I think I saw Ambassador Ward on the call. Also, we saw Rudy Page is on the call too, and Erwin Clear, and Lester Hines. There are some of these are some stalwarts in our community who have done so much for Jamaica over the years, and the diaspora. So we do want to recognize them. Ambassador Watt, I don't know if you want to say a few words before we go. And Angel did put something in the chat where you can put your email so you can get this information sent to you. So Ambassador Ward, I don't know if you're still there. Angel, we can unmute him.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that recognition. What Dr. Gayle presented today was more than interesting. And as you say, he has given us some areas in which we need to have further discussion and focus, and certainly look to assisting on a practical basis. I would also like to say, however, that we have to overcome the statement which was made on the Ambassadors Forum by the minister, which basically, as Dr. Francis has indicated, was that he could not conceive of the diaspora having a role in crime fighting in Jamaica because Jamaica has the best expertise in the world. I would like for, at some future point, for us to have a broader discussion of whether or not the diaspora can be a major factor in helping to fight crime in Jamaica. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Gayle.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Curtis. Ward, oh, there we go. All right. Your name just disappeared on me. Okay. So just a reminder, I put the link inside of the chat. So go ahead, click that link, and it will take you straight through the Google form, which will allow for us to track the right amount of information and get you guys the necessary things that you need, especially a recording of this meeting.
Dr. Gayle, want to respond to a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Dr. Gayle. You are unmuted.
Right. Thank you. There are three questions I don't want us to leave alone. There's a question about post-slave trauma. What we've done is we've compared countries that have never been colonized. So we actually prefer the word colonization because colonization is broader than slavery. Many people don't pay attention to slavery, but they don't pay attention to the process of colonization afterwards. And we've looked at countries that were colonized versus countries that were not colonized. And there are some amount of differences. In fact, colonized countries, as I said earlier in the presentation, make up the New World. And it's the New World that accounts for the 9.5% of world population, but 40% of violence. Because the problem is that they're not making the transition from being ruled and colonized to actually owning their own development. And if you look at these countries, they spend a lot of time depending on projects and funding from the United Nations and from the IDPs, meaning international development partners, right? So a lot of countries in the LAC, you will take their top 5 most effective areas of security, and you'll see half of that sponsored by abroad. That's problematic because it means that you're still driven, you're still not in control or in governance. And so high violence, lack of political governance, what we call a lack of central political authority. And you can write down that term, central political authority, and look up on it and read the work of Charles Tilley to understand the kind of trauma that happens and how this trauma gets into politics and into governance. So it's not just the people who are experiencing the trauma, the governance itself, the frame of governance itself goes on that way. The question of domestic violence, I only had 30 minutes, so I couldn't get into domestic violence, but I I can help you at some other time to look at what happens in homes where there's high IPV. I've only given small amounts because I showed that kids who are sheltered from IPV are actually not violent. And so intimate partner violence does damage to children both ways. When the father is battered by the mother, which is 40% of the time, right? Or the mother picks a fight with the father and burns him with hot oil or give him the Dutch pot treatment, it erodes the boy's sense of dealing with women. For the bulk of it, for 60%, the kids who see the boys who see their father batter their mother actually develop self-hate as well as doubt about life. And a lot of them are also very violent towards women. Now, there is a myth that says that the boys learn from their fathers to batter women. The research has shown quite the opposite. It frustrates them. They have no role model to work with. So it's far more complicated than the simple 1920s socialization, right? We don't use those things anymore, right? We know for sure that there are 16 different impacts in a home when there's intimate partner violence, but that requires its own problem. The truth of the matter, what is core to us as violence experts is that kids who come from domestic violence, and domestic violence means family violence, violence against children, all of that, child abuse, all of that, the bulk of those children will hurt people. So 80% of kids who come from those settings will hurt people. And in fact, between 70 and 85% of those children, of girls who were sexually or physically tortured as children, will then torture their children. And that is why I spoke to the point where violence against women is important, because it kicks off the cycle of violence. And the final one is whether or not corruption is important in organized crime. Yes. What you will notice is that a lot of governments, in order to survive in a frame of high levels of violence, they also facilitate particular groups within the violence belt, and that's called corruption. So you won't see high levels of violence without corruption. Corruption fosters violence, and violence pays for the politicking of who is the victim and who is the perpetrator. It's interesting, and when we say corruption here, we're not just talking about governments, we're talking about through security forces all the way down. All tiers of leadership are impacted by gang and organized crime. Okay? And this is throughout the entire LAC, from Venezuela all the way, El Salvador, Guatemala, Belize, Trinidad, all of it. Anywhere you see high levels of violence, it has to be protected. Aspects of it, not all of it, aspects of it has to have protection from the people who we put in power.
Thank you much. Go ahead, Angel.
All right. Well, I guess we are finalized here. I just want to go ahead and share with you guys just one more thing before I let you go, so you guys can see exactly what it is that I need you guys to fill out for me. So this is basically just going ahead and getting that information so we can make sure that wherever you are better aligned, we can make sure that we are placing you there. So we've got a really quick Google form here for you guys to fill out. And you can go ahead and give us a little bit more about your background, so we can go ahead and make sure that we're moving within our strategy of organize, strategize, and socialize, and make sure that we're actually getting to completion and able to provide assistance to Dr. Gayle, and hopefully he's also going to be providing assistance to us, so that way we can see some changes in crime in Jamaica. So again, thank you guys for attending. Let me just double check here with Dr. Francis, if we are ready to close out here.
Well, I want to say that, yes, we are, but we'll give people opportunity to ask questions if they so desire, if they don't have anything. But I want to give a shout out to the people from Blue Maho Investment. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Blue Maho Investment, Janice McIntosh, Tanya Peralta, and David Mullings. And they're very interested in assisting us to formulate our positions going forward in resolution of the crime problem in Jamaica. And that is significant because they are gurus, our gurus of finance in the diaspora. With the Blue Maho investment. Check it out yourself. Look them up on, in the paper and what have you, and be following our posting. Secondly, Wilbert Davis was there from the beginning. Donovan Tate from Canada. All the people from Canada and the UK. I'm not going to name all of you, but we had people from all of the jurisdictions, USA, Canada, and UK. And one in particular was ill in the hospital and dormant, and he still listened in this afternoon, and that is commendable, ladies and gentlemen. So we have people from all over the world listening to us. I want to thank you very much for supportive in a very short time, and we'll be following up. I want to thank Angel and Donovan and Dr. Dunkley for making sure that this platform, Angel in particular, putting it together like this in such a beautiful fashion. We plan to do this going forward in a structured organization, administrative fashion. So please look out for that. And so please leave your emails and your contact information so that we can get this thing to you. If anybody wishes to, if Dr. Gayle, I don't know what his time is like, if anybody has just came from Mr. Mullings, David Mullings, and I wanted to also thank the Consul General. By the way, we'll be calling on him and Dr. Mullings think they can, not Dr. Tom Cunningham thinks he can stay quiet around there. No, we're going to be calling on them to drive the process, certainly here in Florida. And of course, Donovan smiling, but you're on the target list. So Erwin Clear and Lester Hines, all of you guys who are movers and shakers. George, smiling too? No, you're on it too, sir. Thank you. And of course, I'm back. Bill Tinglin, I saw you, and I'm not afraid to call out your name too. Thank you very much. So, and ask Dr. Gill. Dr. Gill, do you have any time? Do you have any time?
As in now?
Yes, now. Do you have a minute, 10 minutes or so?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, great. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. You don't have to be, but he's going to be around for another 10 minutes to answer a few questions. If you see the one from David Mullings, could you address one for me, please?
Can he just go ahead and ask?
Yeah, just
because I can't find it.
David, if you're hearing us, would you please go ahead and ask, or Janice, or or Tanya.
Thank you very much for having me on. And so you want me to ask a question?
Yes, didn't you have a question? From Dr.
No, I didn't have a question. I was just commenting.
He was making a statement.
Oh, he was? Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Well, it's just good to hear you. I mean, and you can just maybe, since you're on it for 2 minutes, tell us what you're doing to make sure that the diaspora is kept in high repute.
Oh no, well, no, we're not here. We're not here for. I'm doing my. I'm trying to make it easier for us to invest back into Jamaica and the wider region in a impactful way, positive. And that's we're not here for me. We're here for this diaspora crime intervention and prevention task force. And I love that there's a prevention component. We know that Jamaicans locally, some Jamaicans at least, do not want us in the diaspora to be involved in solving that problem. We don't understand why, but I would think that everyone in Jamaica and certainly government and opposition would want to involve the many Jamaicans here in the US who have years, decades of experience, and we can bring that knowledge back to Jamaica. Because I bring up to every single person, we talk about Jamaica and economic growth and the lack of that growth. And it is a World Bank that says that if Jamaica could bring its crime rate down to just the level of Costa Rica, we would see about 5.6% GDP growth per year. 5.6%, right? The recent government was lauding 1.8% in 1 year as amazing, and that is 10 times in historic.
Those are the figures. Those are the figures.
Yeah, and that's so while we are jumping up and down about 1.8% under 2, just crime. And you look at any business in Jamaica, you look at their balance sheet, you look at what they're spending, and you'll see that crime, the cost of security is somewhere between 12 and probably 18% a year of their spend. We need to bring that down. 19%. 19%. That money, if we could just half that, that is money that is going towards hiring more people, training more people, becoming more globally competitive, improving exports. We need to make sure we bring down crime. The cost is real. Thank you, Dr. Gayle.
Yeah, it's wiping out 12% of the Ministry of Health budget just for stabbings and shootings, and yeah, it's just too much.
Dr. Gayle, how can we help you? How can we help you as the objective of your audit? You did not speak to that. I know you're a modest person, but could you speak to that for me, please?
Right. Well, using the same trajectory we used in Belize, it requires 500,000, and I believe when the negotiations come with the government to invest in it, and that has started, that they should not exceed 50%. So it means that different groups like the private sector of Jamaica should invest some amount of money, maybe 100,000. The Diaspora group can invest 100,000. And so that there's a buy-in in terms of ownership, because that's where the serious concern is. Anybody at all who works in violence knows that ownership is the core. You don't want a situation where any single group owns a national audit.
Thank you very much, sir. I think that's a great answer, and I want to thank you very much. Is there anyone else on the call? Mr. Herbert Davis, Mr. Donovan Tate, anybody else who would like to say something? And I want to also stress that the mayor, we did not just invite Mr. Mullings on, we want him to hear what we are doing. And certainly we haven't now got a financial arm that we can also do things with. It's called PayPal Giving Fund, and it is a not-for-profit. So we have that, and we're trying to put together an administration to administer all of this with transparency, accountability, and foresight. Okay, so is there anybody else who wants to ask Dr. Gayle something? He has only another 5 minutes.
We've got two hands up, Dean Roden's hand, and we've got Bill Tingling.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, Dean, I'm gonna divert to Bill real quick because you got a chance to speak to Dr. Gayle. So let me just go ahead and unmute Bill here. All right, Bill, go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Dr. Gayle. Hi, everyone. Rupert, thank you so very much for having me on. A couple of questions to Dr. Gayle. Dr. Gayle, pursuant to your theory, your principle of criminal justice studies, can you share with us then in regards to Belize and Jamaica? First of all, I'm from Betheltown, Westmoreland, Jamaica, hailing from that area. If your principle was executed there in Belize, can you tell me then why Jamaica and Belize would be at the same security level as per the State Department?
Okay, all right. So let's begin with Belize. Now, Belize, when we started in 2008, when they threw the hand grenade in the pub, the homicide rate rocketed to the 50s very quickly. If you look at Belize, because of its size, so small countries, their homicide rate gets recorded and has an impact on you much more quickly. So remember, we don't have a half-life. A life is one person. So if you take Belize, Belize population is under 400. It means that Belize homicide can hit 100 per 100,000 very easily. Let's take even smaller countries, St. Kitts and Nevis. Quite every now and then they pop into the top 10 and they shock people, but their population is so small that if they kill 9 people because of a gang feud, then it's going to drive the homicide rate above the Civil War benchmark. So small countries, the impact on intervention is not going to show very quickly, because every single person who dies in a small state is going to have massive impact. If you look at Mexico City is one of the most violent places on earth to be, but Mexico is not in the top 5 and is not going because their population is so large. So what have we achieved in Belize? We've achieved the setup of something called the Restore Belize Secretariat in the Prime Minister's office. That is a major change. We have a new government now. We need to continue the work, but the homicide rate for Belize for this year, because what we've been looking at the impact of COVID. If you are having a trajectory in the correct direction, COVID should reduce your murder rate. Let me say that again. This is a small test you can check on. If you are practicing stuff that relates to the ontological security of your people, then when COVID comes, it's going to cause people to have less movement. It's going to restrict gangs. It's going to increase domestic violence, but reduce gang violence. That's the normal frame. If you look at Belize, they've had a 38% reduction under COVID, and we're trying to see, the job now is to see if we can get that to hold. Trinidad is 28%, Jamaica, no movement. And I can take the other countries that have no movement. So in other words, what are we trying to get done in Belize? We're trying to get so Belize is a work in progress. It's not a success story. I think that may have, if that is what you got, then you may have got it wrong. Belize is a work in progress. When you have a homicide rate of 27 per 100,000, that's not what we want. The average for the world is 9.4. We want your homicide rate to go down. But remember where Belize is. Belize is right there beside Mexico, and it's right there beside the United States. It's right on that corridor called the Central American Belt. And it means, therefore, that the ontological security of young men and young women in Belize is going to have to go up tremendously in order for Belize to become stable. So for the next 10, 15 years, Belize has to have a trajectory of opening schools, of having a policy. One of the policies that we're working hard to change in Belize is that the state must be responsible for a human being up to the age of minimum 18. Currently, they are still in the 1950s. And if any Belizeans listening to me, this is not to offend you, but they are still carrying a policy that says the state is responsible for you up to standard 8, which means you're 13, 14 years old. These are policies that need to change. But what's fascinating is that a country with such backward laws still is making more progress than some of the other countries. But it is a work in progress. It requires a lot of work. It is a new government. I haven't met them yet. I've spent the bulk of the time working with the former government, but a lot of work needs to be done. Now, the truth of the matter is a country on the outside can zone Jamaica, Trinidad, and Belize in the same group. There's nothing I can do about that. The point is that that is really not the case on the ground. Trinidad, on the other hand, has tremendous amount of resources. It's the richest country in the region, pound for pound. And they have cells of violence, such as Laventil, John, Bangladesh. Oh, Bangladesh is not a country this time, it's a community. It means that it has a lot of Indians, all right? So it has these communities that they have to work with. And so Trinidad will actually create greater ontological security and come out of the top 10 much quicker than Jamaica. Jamaica is the most complicated of the group, but I am beginning to hear the kind of sounds that say we can progress. I hope I've helped.
Yes, no, you definitely have. You definitely have. Donovan?
Well, yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Because of time, we're gonna have to wrap it up real soon. And Dr. Gayle, we do really appreciate this. We're gonna have to do a follow-up, but folks, if you haven't done so as yet, there's a Google Doc that's in the chat. Please fill that out so we can continue with the organizing, strategizing, and of course get everyone acclimated to do what we have to do. This is a very serious subject, and everyone knows how we are here to help Jamaica, and we're going to take our best. I know we have plenty of people who are in the diaspora who's willing to put forth their best effort, and of course we can make a change. It's only us working together, and we're going to make sure this is done. We have a couple of stalwarts here on the call, and of course we're going to continue to do this over and over again. And Dr. Gayle, you're truly phenomenal, and we do thank you for all you've done. Dr. Francis, you're the man that's always looking out for the security and protection of Jamaica, and we do appreciate that. Dr. Dunkley, Dr. Mair, everybody that's on here, we do appreciate you again, and thank you so much, Angel. So we can wrap it up if there's nothing else.
I just want to say that I know we're constrained, but if you guys just give me about 2 minutes, somebody's gonna kill me if I don't ask him to ask a question. Wilfred Rattigan, would you please ask your question? And then we close after that. And Steve, we'll have to take a phone call afterwards. But Wilfred, would you please, our FBI agent, we can't leave him out. Can we do that, please? 5 minutes. Mr. Rattigan.
I don't see him here in the chat.
Where is he then?
What is he listed as?
What are you, let me ask him, what are you listed as? Hold on, man.
I did see him earlier.
Yeah, there were a couple people who dropped off.
Dropped off, yeah.
No, well, I just asked him what is he listed as? Listed as, I don't. He's calling me. Oh God, you dropped off. You dropped off.
I think he's off the call.
What's your name? No, he's not. He's on. He's on. He says he's not dropped off. So what are you listed as? Hello. Well then, all right. He can say he can see it, but we have to unmute you. Okay, could you just unmute everybody and him come on then, because that's the only way out. I said STTT. That's him.
So he has the access to unmute.
It's
yeah, tell him to unmute now.
Unmute yourself now. Okay, I think that's it. Could you try now? Unmute yourself.
I did.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Gayle, good afternoon. And good afternoon to everyone on the forum. Let me start by saying that I grew up in Waterhouse, and one of the few people who made it out of Waterhouse. And I was fortunate enough to serve with the FBI for 30 years. And I've done my fair share of public corruption investigations. In fact, I was also on the Jamaican drug gang squad in New York, where we investigated drug gangs coming out of Jamaica. I just want to do a follow-up with the question I asked about public corruption. If you're going to do a study and you're going to incorporate the public corruption piece of it, the question then that is begging is, how do you expect the government to assist with that when there's a great possibility that some of these people that you're going to be doing the study on, they're also part of the problem?
Okay, good question. Very, very good question. The issue is that we're not convinced that corruption can be addressed by name and shame, because we've never seen name and shame work in the history of the region. I had a group called ITAD some years ago when they came to Jamaica, and I was one of the Jamaican managers, what we call local managers, working with a team to assess aspects of government. And I've also done this in other countries. And we've never, ever seen name and shame work. What do we mean by name and shame? It means that there's a research that comes out, and this research or something shows that there's awesome amount of corruption and so forth and so forth. It gets worse. In the last election, in fact, a series of elections, some politicians run on the issue about corruption. And when we went on the ground and interviewed people, they said big thief, little thief. If you understand big thief, little thief syndrome, you understand that name and shame will not work. So if a party called A is accused of being thieves, and we're using words that everybody makes sense of, then the other group says, but you are just a bigger thief, and who is the bigger thief? So there's an acknowledgement. Jamaica suffers from something called victory addiction, and that's where the problem is. So there are two sets of problems: segmentary factionalism and victory addiction. Segmentary factionalism means that 94% of Jamaicans will put a discussion about their party before the country. Test 2011. Which do you think is worse? Trafigura, Manhat. And we tagged some of the persons earlier as JLPs and PMP. The JLP says Trafigura. The PMP says Manhat. And we had three more other questions that tag them, but the questions are organized in an index in a way in which the average person doesn't realize that we're separating them into their tolerance of corruption. So Jamaica has an extremely high tolerance for corruption, and therefore doing an audit on corruption would literally not help. So in other words, the audit is focused on what's happening with young people, where the problems are, in the sessions, and we've done this in Trinidad, and I can assure you that when we did it in Trinidad, a lot of persons were offended because despite the fact that there is no built-in corruption frame within the study will actually have to list corruption. And it offended persons. Persons were very offended. We've done it we've done little bits for for groups of other people, and the people in charge have been very offended by it, and nothing has come out of it. Victory addiction, again, is part of the core of the problem. What is victory addiction? It means that when JLPs win, the PMPs expect that when their time comes, it's time to go back to the feeding tree. When the PMPs win, the JLP says, all right, our time will come. And when you actually interview people across the country, even though they don't know the theory of victory addiction that says we are addicted to victory, from as early as 8 years old, children are trained to understand that if your party don't win, you will suffer. Now, in Belize, I've had to do a lot of work with this. I've actually had meetings with government persons there to say that you have to have a central frame. But if you look at the structure of most countries in the LAC, the member of parliament have a direct umbilical connection to the populace rather than a central benefits office. Let's go to the United States. Let's go to England just for a bit, hypothetically. In England, that I understand much more than the United States, they have a central benefits office. So if Donovan has a situation, he can go to the central benefits office with a recommendation from the MP's office to get assistance with his 3 children who are starving. That's not how it goes in Jamaica. The closest we have is PATH, and in terms of central government, but each member of parliament still has a certain amount of money called Community Development Fund that operates at an umbilical or personal or intimate level. Now, when you outline what is called a violence reduction plan, which comes after an audit, some of these things will have to be addressed because that's not how developed countries operate. A member of parliament can't be going into his pocket in public giving people, here, see, I'm giving you $100,000. You know I love it from the bottom of my heart. But that's what goes on in LAC countries. So so we don't really waste time anymore focusing on those, putting in a big section in an audit that will simply embarrass the state, because the state already has a machinery backed by the people to simply shift away from whatever is printed. We look at the raw data, and in the violence reduction plan, we get the government to agree that the corruption that is connected to the organized crime must shift. But the audit itself is focused on the ontological security of young men, including the body counts, which you should know is different from the murder rate. Let me clear that up very quickly and leave it alone. So when you go to a state, let's say you go to a community called A, that community may have 10 dead people on paper, but when you do an audit, it turns up 14 and 15 because we have in Jamaica a very fat, let me find a road term, a very fat list called missing. Audits don't deal with missing because people know they're not missing. So audits are very intimate, they're very deep, but at the same time, it has to be done in a way that operates with raw data. And it's precisely, the question you're asking is precisely why we really don't want our government to exclusively own an audit. Because under no circumstance can we hide the data when people begin to speak. It will pop out.
Thank you very much, sir.
I hope I've answered.
Yes.
You definitely have answered. So thank you again so much for your time, your knowledge, just all the things that you have taught. At least you've taught me a lot today, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one with that sentiment. But what I am going to have to do is go ahead and close this up. What I'm going to do is save the chat, because we do have some unanswered questions that we can definitely explore upon our next meetings as we are progressively moving through our strategy as a task force. So I am going to close out, and I'm so sorry, Mr. Wright. I'm going to have to lower your hand there, but we're going to go ahead and close out this meeting. Thank you guys so much for attending. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday here with us and being educated by Dr. Gayle today. Donovan, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
I just want to say thank you to each and everyone. Dr. Gayle, again, learning experience that we have all picked up something from you today, and it's very, very overwhelming, and we do appreciate it. We will now look at crime and prevention in a different manner and how we can put together, strategies on how to help solve that. Thank you again, Dr. Francis, for the wonderful thing you've done. This is an ongoing thing because, when we talk about crime in Jamaica, everyone is going to ask questions. Everyone might think they have solutions, but if we come together collectively, we can help solve the problem. It's not just a talking point where we just come in, there's no solution. We have to find answers to how we can actually save Jamaica and save our youth. So again, thank each and everyone for being a part of this, and we're going to continue doing what we're doing to make Jamaica safe.
Also, I'd like to just add this one thing. If you know of anyone who would like to be a part of the task force that was unable to attend the meeting today, the Google form is accessible to them as well. So if you'd like to share it with them, they are able to fill that out. And that allows us to keep connecting with more and more experts in certain areas. So thank you again so much. And you guys are free to go.
All right. Have a good Sunday evening.
Have a
Good night. Good night.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Dr. Dunkley.
Yes, Donovan, thank you, man. Great job you guys did.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Dean. The wonderful job you're doing.
Not my team, and I wanted to just recognize our team. We're doing such a wonderful job.